John Anthony filling in for Dan Prof. I'm also the host of Black and Right Radio, heard every Saturday right here on these airways from 4 to 7 p.m. and also in Michigan from 5 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. The times are 5 to 7 there, as I stated, on 92.7 FM and AM 1400. The Answer. You know, our next guest, I when Quinn sent me this information, I said, oh, yes, definitely. I definitely want to talk to him because I really do believe there will be a battle for the future of the Republican Party, and I think it's already begun. Even though the 28 presidential election remains more than, two years away. Some of the questions that I've had, will this next Republican nominee, will this person inherit and takes charge and leads the Donald Trump's America First movement, or will they return it to the party of its pre-Trump roots, or is there something that's going to be entirely new that's going to be created? I mean, you see the names that are being bandied about, Vance, Rubio, that might be the ticket. DeSantis may think about it. Thomas Massie is thinking about running for president. And so I that's one of the reasons why I definitely wanted to talk to our next guest. But at the same time, another debate is unfolding over American foreign policy. You have these conservatives who are arguing that Cuba, Iran, and these radical leftist movements and these anti-Israel activism, and because they're truly, certainly revolutionary governments are connected by this ideology known as Luke Nicastro has termed a third worldism. He's also senior editor at the American Conservative and former national security advisor to Senator Josh Hawley. Luke, welcome to Chicago's Morning Answer.
Thanks so much for having me.
Luke, before we debate whether third worldism is a useful term, what exactly do its proponents mean when they use it?
So they basically use it as a way of describing what they see as the worldview of essentially America's enemies, at least those of its enemies that are in what is conventionally called the third world. So the Iranian regime, the Cuban government. They even apply it to some internal critics like Mayor Zoran Mamdani of New York City. And basically what they mean by this worldview is a way of understanding the world that divides it between oppressors, who are basically the West, so the wealthy, developed societies of Europe and North America, and they'll throw Israel in too, and then the oppressed, which is basically everybody else. And the supreme imperative of this worldview, at least according to those who think it is a meaningful kind of way of understanding the world, is that the oppressed have to overthrow the oppressors. It's kind of like this fetishization of victimhood, if you will.
Yeah. You know, when you look at this, the basic third worldist worldview, do you think it could, because it reportedly divides this international politics between a dominant global North and an oppressed global South? Isn't that framework genuinely influential within Marxist, anti-colonial, academic, and progressive movements?
Yeah, I mean, there's something to it, right? I mean, I don't want to dismiss it entirely out of hand. What I am more concerned about is the way that it is being used as a catch-all label that flattens complexity and simplifies a very sort of difficult world in ways that I fear will generate policies, including maybe some military interventions, that are going to be really bad for this republic.
Yeah. I saw the video. I wish if I hadn't been out speaking last night, I would have had that video where Secretary of State Marco Rubio talked about Cuba's influence in what we see in a lot of the revolutionary stuff that's going on with the protests and things like that nature, that they've actually found a nexus, a connection of who's actually funding it. How important is it? Because I've said on my own radio show, where's RICO to determine when you see a lot of this stuff, you see all these items being bought, bricks being bought, and you know that there's somebody behind this. How important is it to break that up here in America and remove those influences?
So, I mean, I'll say I think that threat is pretty exaggerated.
Okay.
I read the report. I read the 100-page Cuba report that Secretary Rubio's State Department put out. The vast majority of that report is concerned with things that happened before I was born, right? It's very, I mean, to be candid, it's very focused on the Cold War. And yes, like Cuba was a really kind of threatening adversary during the Cold War, not so much because of its absolute power, but because it was 90 miles off the coast of the United States, right?
Yeah.
But the situation has changed, right, over the last 60 to 70 years. And you look at Cuba today, it's an island nation of 8.5 million people. It can't keep the lights on. It can't feed its own people. I think its leaders are much more concerned about staying in power and continuing to steal from their own citizens than they are with trying to overthrow the richest and most powerful society that's ever existed in human history, which is to say the United States.
Yeah. Now, Luke, you see across this country and even in some other parts of the world, this is Israel, this anti-Semitism. Where is this coming from, and what does it mean to the people here in America with all of this? I mean, you see the Candace Owens, the Tucker Carlsons, everybody that is going after one of America's oldest friends, and it's only true friend in the Middle East, some might say. How important is it to maintain that relationship with Israel? And is it fair to have criticism of Israel?
Oh, it's eminently fair. I actually think the relationship needs to be totally revised. I think that the relationship that the United States has with Israel today is very damaging to American national interests. And I think that a lot of the criticism that Israel is receiving is a result of its own actions, whether those are in Gaza, whether those are in Lebanon, whether those are in Iran, right? I mean, the coverage of sort of the origins of the war that this country finds itself embroiled in really emphasizes the degree to which Israel was instrumental in persuading us to launch it when we did. Yeah. And I think that's been a very destructive thing for us.
But see, I look at the flip side of that. You look at what happened with Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, and how he said he wanted to arrest Bibi Netanyahu. Yeah, what authority and what power? But then there was a reporter that posed to him, well, what about what happened on October 7th? And he really hemmed and hawed and really didn't answer that. So a lot of these atrocities, I've been to Israel. And a lot of these atrocities that he's saying, and in which America doesn't even acknowledge the International Criminal Court. I mean, when you look at somebody like this Zohran Mamdani, that's coming out and is now the face of DSA and things of that nature, how crucial it is to put a cap on these DSA people that are running for office? Not a cap a cap on them.
Well, so look, I'm not a Mamdani supporter. I'm somebody who is certainly on the right. But I think that a lot of what those people are tapping into with respect to Israel is real and has kind of a bipartisan basis. Now, to your point about ignoring the atrocities, I do agree with that, right? And I think that's reprehensible. I think that you have to be willing and able to acknowledge the savagery and the barbarism of Hamas. I mean, I've been to Israel, right? I've seen some of the kibbutzim that were attacked on October 7th. It's gruesome. It's really horrifying, right? You have to be able to condemn that. So I totally agree there. But it's also eminently fair to criticize the actions of the government of Israel. Since October 7th and beyond just Gaza, right, you look at kind of the sorts of influence that they've had in the Middle East, where I would argue they've been more of a destabilizing than a stabilizing factor. And I think criticizing Israel on those grounds is entirely legitimate. And I think that there is a lot of appetite in this country to revise that relationship. And that's part of what Mamdani and some of these other DSA folks are tapping into. Now, the other stuff, the woke stuff, I think people are done with. Yeah. I think the economic stuff, once they see how that turns out in practice, like they may not be quite so keen on it. But there are real grievances that these people are tapping into.
That I agree with, and I actually I just finished writing a book called The Counterfeit Republic, and I talk about the grievances in which what led to the people like Zohran Mamdani and the DSA and the communists who have decided to rise again. But I want to pivot because back in 2015, I was with Marco Rubio's campaign leadership team in the state of Illinois. And you wrote that the most likely 2028 Republican nominee will either be Vice President J.D. Vance or Secretary of State Marco Rubio. I'm a huge Marco Rubio fan. What makes those two men, in your estimation, the early favorites? And what could happen between now and the primaries that would weaken their positions?
Well, I think what makes them the favorites is just like the high positions that they occupy, the fact that they're in government, right? In the case of J.D. Vance, he's the second highest elected official in the country. In the case of Marco Rubio, I mean, he's leading one of the most important departments in the cabinet. And I think both men have had, in various ways, like pretty strong records of success. Now, I think they represent divergent tendencies.
Yeah.
And, my own sort of personal predilections put me much more on the side of Vance than on the side of Rubio. But I think that they are both displaying a competence and a skill that, in addition to the fact that they're, in government right now, and that, whomever Trump ends up supporting or endorsing is going to clearly weigh very, very heavily on the minds of the Republican electorate. All of these things, to me, elevate Vance and Rubio above anybody else in the potential contenders.
So do you think Vance and Rubio, do you think they'll represent this genuinely different directions for the Republican Party, or would either man largely continue President Trump's America First agenda, or do you think there'll be like a tweaking of it?
I think they represent different visions. I think J.D. Vance is much more of what I would consider to be America First.
Yeah.
I think that, Rubio stands for a much more interventionist foreign policy of the sort that I think actually a lot of Trump voters were voting against and wanted to see less of. I think Vance is sort of truer to that vision. I also think that Vance is more sort of genuinely populist. I think to the extent that the party is going in this kind of like common good direction where we're getting away from the sort of free market or laissez-faire extremism that characterized the Republicans of the past and more towards this Trumpian, populist, we're a little bit more comfortable doing things like, for instance, having the government take equity stakes in companies.
Yeah.
We're a little more comfortable with like entitlement programs. We don't want to cut Medicaid, we don't want to cut Medicare. So Vance is more that. I think Rubio is also sympathetic to some of that stuff, but is a little bit more in the vein of the traditional Republican Party.
Yeah.
So I would argue that those are kind of the major differences between the two men.
Yeah, and Rubio is considered a neocon more so than J.D. Vance, who's more of a let's have a conversation. Sure. Now, you served as Senator Josh Hawley, National Security Advisor until recently. Now, I'm telling you, he puts on one of the best cases of prosecution in any committee that he's in. What did you learn from working with him that the public does not fully understand about his political philosophy or governing priority? Because the more I hear him talk, the more I want him on the Supreme Court.
Yeah, I think he's genuinely. I would say he's like clearly like the smartest man in the Senate today and in Congress today. He's just so incredibly intellectual and genuine, and he has this vast erudition that informs a lot of his positions. So I guess that's something that some people might not realize is, you see this guy and he is just really, hammering these just like crazy leftists who come before the committee, right? Yeah. But he's also an intellectual, right? And he is just very sort of well-spoken. He's the same guy in committee and outside of committee. So that's what I would say about Josh Hawley.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, I think he will be I don't know what his ambitions are. Does he want to run for president or not? But I'm telling you, he's young. The guy is gifted. He's smart, and he understands the law better than probably anybody that I listened to on the Hill today, outside of Mike Lee. But you talked also about these three competing visions: fusionism, populism, and libertarianism. And in that you talk about Cruz, Hawley, and Paul as these representatives of fusion, populism, and libertarians. Which of these philosophies most you think, in your estimation, closely reflects the Republican voter today? And do these three guys stand as that threat against a Vance Rubio ticket?
Yeah, I think, so it's a little bit of a cop-out, but I think that all three of those tendencies are present in the Republican electorate today.
Okay.
I think that historically fusionism has been the dominant ideology, which is this notion of basically like you're blending this, it goes back to Reagan, really, this kind of like strong foreign policy with a very kind of market-friendly economic policy and a commitment to traditional social values, right?
Yeah.
I think that populism is more of the direction that President Trump has been taking the party. But libertarianism it's never been the dominant trend, but it's always kind of been there under the surface. Americans are very individualistic. They're very jealous of their liberties. And people like Rand Paul do actually speak, I think, for quite a lot of Republican voters and also for, instincts that some Republican voters, maybe they're not like fully libertarian, but, on certain things like the Second Amendment say, I think that they're kind of like the truest exponents of what many, many Republican voters think.
I saw that photo of Thomas Maskey and a lot of those guys getting together and talking about no new wars. My only issue with that was we can't defend ourselves. We can't stop this evil regime of Iran who should have been dealt with decades ago. Should they, because they continue to attack and kill Americans, we're not supposed to go after and destroy these people. That was the only part I had with those, and I do stand with Israel over this as it relates to Gaza and Iran. I've been a strong proponent of Israel, and I've taken a lot of flack for it. And I really don't care, Luke. But people in this day and age, we can't have opposing views and still get along. That's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think polarization is a real issue.
Yeah. Well, Luke Nicastro, we're gonna have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us on Chicago's Morning Answer.
Thanks so much for having me.
He's a senior editor at the American Conservative, and former national security advisor to Josh Hawley, and he joined us on the Alpha Wealth Group Answer Line.
It's like a hot, steaming cup of information to start your day. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Chicagoland certified financial planning professional Tim Stearns discusses taxes in retirement.
Most people are paying more in taxes and keeping less of their money to live and do what they enjoy. That's why we've put out the retirement tax bill calculator online. You can see with your own eyes just how much you might be overpaying. It's a valuable tool, $500 value, but we made it free for you to view and run your own numbers at MVP. See